NYMEX, the New York Mercantile Exchange, the largest oil trading market in the world.
Seb 101, 105 call spread, 102.90.
Billions of dollars of oil and gas contracts pass across these screens.
99.03!
Energy that's vital to the survival of the US economy.
And it's these traders who are buying and selling those contracts based on what the future price of oil might get to. Essentially one huge betting game, largely controlled by investment banks and hedge funds.
When protests flared across the Arab world earlier this year, investors here became deeply concerned.
You had Bahrain, you had Saudi Arabia, and these protesters were starting to spread and things like that. And we looked at this and said, wait a minute, this could be very bad.
Stabilizing the oil markets has been a central tenet of US foreign policy for decades. It's often meant empowering dictators in oil-producing countries at the expense of supporting democratic ideals.
So 125 total.
But the Arab Spring has brought about change nobody expected, including the Obama administration. While the US has become engaged in civil war in North Africa, its approach towards the oil-rich Gulf has been very different.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
What are we going to do, as I said? We're going to stop buying their oil? That's inconceivable. We need it for the functioning of our economy.
Bahrain is a country where foreign journalists have been banned. Fault Lines has come here at the invitation of the US military, which has its Middle East Navy headquarters in this tiny Gulf state. We're also here for another reason, to secretly meet those who've been protesting and calling for democracy, and find out how they feel about the lack of US intervention here. We've been speaking to people who've been reporting here recently over the past few weeks, saying that, they've been moving hotels 4 times in any given week, trying to escape the eye of authorities who are really cracking down on media coverage of the events here. So we really don't know what to expect. It's a very strange situation that we're in. The Arab Spring came to Bahrain on February the 14th, when protesters took to the streets calling for economic reform and political equality for the country's majority Shia community. Labeled as agents of Iran by the government, Bahraini security forces opened fire days later on the crowds at the Pearl Roundabout. The United Nations called the response shocking and blatant violations of international law. More than 30 people have been killed and hundreds injured since the protests began.
From their work and targeted in their living, thousands of people prisoners for every 1,000 citizens today. All of them, or most of them, were systematically tortured, electrocuted, sexually harassed, sexually assaulted, hanged.
Nabil Rajab is one of the few human rights activists here willing to show his face on camera.
You have thousands of similar cases.
Really? Nabil gives counseling and advice to families caught in the violence. He told us that given the strong US military presence in Bahrain, one of the questions they most often ask is why the US hasn't done more.
The silence of United States have disappointed people very much. It is very much clear now to the United States is democracy and human rights should be applied only in those countries where United States have a problem with, but not with those dictatorships they have a good relation with. And we see that very clearly.
Nabil's house is under constant surveillance. We're taking what precautions we can to get our material out safely and protect the identities of those who don't want their faces shown. Protesters that have spoken with Al Jazeera before have been beaten, arrested, or gone missing. But some are still willing to speak out.
If every person kept silence, then the external world will not know our problem. Then we have to blame ourselves for being silent.
Syed Youssef was a teacher. He was fired after taking part in the protests at the Pearl Roundabout. Like Nabil, he's disappointed by America's response.
After the visit of Secretary of Defense to Bahrain, they have attacked the roundabout after one day. And after the visit of the Deputy of Secretary of Foreign Affairs, they have a store in Wadrad village. And after every visit, especially this Jeffrey Feltman, his reputation is very bad here. People are talking about him badly.
The King and the Crown Prince have outlined a vision for Bahrain by which the moderate voices would work together to chart a positive path forward, and that's what we want to see.
Ambassador Jeffrey Feltman is the lead official for the US State Department handling all Middle East affairs. He's visited Bahrain 8 times since February.
These protesters know you by name. They know that you visited the country several times. I mean, what they ask is that the US speaks out and condemns what's going on there in stronger terms.
But again, I would just go back to what I said. It may not be satisfactory to those who wish that we would beat our chests and jump and run, and sort of issue lots of statements. We need to look at how is best to promote our policies in any country in the world, depending on the relationship we have with that country, depending on the other strategic interests we have in that country.
One strategic interest the US has in Bahrain is the presence of the Fifth Fleet, America's most important naval base. From their headquarters in Manama, the fleet covers nearly 7 million square kilometers of maritime territory, but most importantly, the vital shipping lanes for Middle East oil.
All civilized people benefit from this free flow of goods and services. So a vast majority of the world's energy comes out of this region, which is one of the reasons it's such an important region for everybody.
Less than 250 kilometers from the coast of Iran, the island of Bahrain is ruled by a Sunni royal family, the Al Khalifas. Their rule is backed by their powerful Sunni neighbor and America's strongest ally in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia.
I think the calculations of Bahrain are much more complex and difficult for us because, number one, our Fifth Fleet is stationed there. Number two, Bahrain, of course, is important to Saudi Arabia, one of our major partners in the Arab world. And number three, no one wants to see Iran, which is a government that we despise, profit from these changes in the Arab world. I think all those calculations have led the United States government to be much more cautious.
On the 14th of March, after nearly a month of protests, Saudi Arabia dispatched a military force of 1,000 troops to help put down the protests in Bahrain. US officials have said they were not informed the Saudis were heading across the border, even though US Secretary of Defense Robert Gates met with the Bahraini ruling family just days before.
Do you think they told the US they were sending Saudi troops into Bahrain?
No, they just did it. They did not consult us. They considered it their business, not ours.
They've lost faith, perhaps, in the US support for that?
Because they thought we ran away from Mubarak.
Saudi Arabia's decision to send 1,000 troops along this causeway into Bahrain was widely seen here as an attempt to counter the perceived threat of Iran. They were there to crush the protests, but many feel that this was a shot across the bow for Tehran. No one from Bahrain's government would speak to us about the crackdown. But there are people here who think it was justified. Adel Maymoun is a Sunni businessman.
Okay, here in Bahrain, when you say you're protesting because of your poor living situation, come on, that's a joke. It cannot be. My office boy has 3 mobiles. Okay, and later on, the evidence it showed up about Iran's involvement, and of course Hezbollah from Lebanon, which is backed by Iran.
The characterization of the protests as a regional power grab by Iran is made by US officials too. It stems from sectarian dynamics in this Sunni-ruled country, where roughly 2/3 of the population is Shia.
The reports of the destruction of Shia mosques in some villages, and this being part of the crackdown, I mean, do you think that's true? And if so, do you think
I can say you one thing. I'm a Bahraini. I'm living in Bahrain. And during the previous period, from the start of the protests and everything, I have never left the country. There is no single Shia mosque which has been demolished.
But we'd heard differently, that in villages north of Bahrain's capital, it was possible to see evidence of the destruction.
Okay, no, just down, yeah, don't worry.
With police checkpoints everywhere, it was difficult to film without getting caught.
Trying to find a way around the checkpoints that we've just seen, blocking the entrance to the village of Naladrat, which was raided just a couple of days ago.
After a detour, we managed to reach a pre-arranged meeting point with a contact in the protest movement.
Okay, I have a number. We have a big white SUV behind a mosque. Yeah.
That's Adwara. That's mosque. Here.
Yeah.
On that, they are destroyed.
This is clearly the remains of a destroyed mosque. There are religious books lying amongst the rubble. It was destroyed by JCB diggers in the past few weeks during the crackdown, and apparently this is going on all over Bahrain. Yeah, down there. We're told that we have to move on very quickly because there are people watching these areas.
Yes.
If we hang around too long, the police are going to turn up.
After showing us more destroyed buildings, our contact took us to meet a man whose two brothers had recently been taken away by the police.
We don't know, this is the problem, we don't know what is the situation. He's alive or not, we don't know. We cannot go to ask about him, because if we go there, they will catch us also.
Everybody's in the same situation.
All of us, all Bahraini people.
The climate of fear is palpable here, and once again there's disbelief that the US isn't doing more.
I mean, the US, the people, I'm sure they are with us. They are trying to help us, the people. But the government, I don't know why. Maybe because they have the fifth base here, I don't know the base.
Are you concerned by the reports of human rights abuses that have gone on since the protests began in February?
You know, I'm focused on what goes on in the water and in the maritime domain.
So that doesn't affect your presence here or your position? That's not something that
we have a long-standing relationship with the Kingdom of Bahrain, and they are a very solid partner.
But is there any level of human rights abuse that could affect the position of the US military here? I mean, if
the Kingdom of Bahrain is a long-standing partner, and we are very committed to the relationship, and they're an important part. We've been here for 60 years.